to our second presentation, we still will be discussing identity and memory issues with Victoria Sereda. Victoria is Associate Professor of Sociology at Catholic University and postdoctoral fellow at Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute. So, and Victoria's presentation will be about the transformation of identities.
This is my pleasure to be here and to be able to discuss a project which is really very interesting and has very rich data. And today I'll be presenting only very thin slides of this project. The project was called next slide. Regionation and Beyond, and it included 2 surveys which were conducted in March 2013 and 2015 with sampling 6,000 in Ukraine, which means that the uniqueness of this project is that we can go beyond typical division into 4 or 5 or maximum 6 macro regions, and we can have a look at what's happening at the oblast level. And it was also followed up by more than 500 in-depth interviews focusing on memory, identity, urban space, religious practices, language practices, and so on. So I'll be focusing on 2 issues. Identity with a focus on national identity and memory today. So in the first part, we asked our respondents to self-identify, and there was a list of a lot of possibilities, including both. But here I will be presenting Ukrainian and Russian identity. And if you look at media, there are a lot of discussion about what happened to Ukrainian identity post-Euromaidan situation, and a lot of expectations that actually it became stronger. But if we are looking at self-identification in different regions, what we notice that actually in majority of Ukrainian citizens self-identified as Ukrainians already in 2013, including Donbass. It's over 70% there. The only exclusion was Crimea, and if we're talking about Russian identity, it's still quite weak with exception of Crimea in 2013, and we do not have any specifically strong shifts in 2015. We also wanted to know to what extent this identity is important to people, because to claim that you are someone does not really mean that this identity is really important for you. So we also measured importance, and there was a 5-point scale, and there was a list over 14 different types of identities, including class, professional, and here I'll be focusing only on 6 territorial identities. And if we look at them, we see that there are 3 quite strong on 5-point scale, and they're almost equally strong in all regions. This is local, regional, and Ukrainian, and we have 3 weaker identities, with one with quite strong regional partner, which is Russian, and then Slav and European, which is weaker. And if we are looking at means, we actually see that nothing really shifting, with exception of Russian identity, and we should take into account that we could not conduct our survey in Donbass and those territories which were occupied, and also probably some of our respondents were afraid to say that they are Russian, to disclose a Russian identity, because of a lot of debates and propaganda discussions and political discussions in media. So they preferred not to name themselves like that. And another important myth is that actually, because of Euromaidan, European identity is now important for Ukrainians, but if we compare 2016 and 2013 and 2015 data, we don't have any strict shifts. And we still see that European identity is quite weak in Ukraine. It usually closer to mean or below mean. And another important, for me, stereotype is that we have pro-European West and pro-East Slav east of Ukraine. But if you look at the range, you see that actually both identities are quite strong in practically all regions of Ukraine. We also looked at the identity, both to what extent, for example, Ukrainian identity is important both to Russians, for those who self-identify as Russians, and for Ukrainians. And I think very important finding is this yellow column. This is importance of Ukrainian identity to Russians, to those who self-identify to it as Russian. And we see that in 2013, Ukrainian identity was quite important for those who saw themselves as Russians, both in Donbass and in Crimea. And we looked also vice versa, to what extent Russian identity is or was important for Ukrainians, both in 2013 and 2015. And we see it's to a lesser extent, but we see the similar tendencies that Russian identity was also important for Ukrainians, which means that we don't have two strictly divided ethnic groups in Ukraine. And in contrary to Russian media propaganda, if we are looking at Donbass, we see that actually quite different identity processes were happening there. So they are very much were intertwined. We also looked at the national identity, content of national identity. What does it mean to be for someone to be Ukrainian? And we do see some shifts. We see that political component is becoming stronger in 2015, and ethnic component is becoming weaker. And there is a myth or a lot of discussions, stereotypical discussions again, that the west of Ukraine is more toward cultural or ethnic type of national identity, and east is more of political type. But if we look at the maps, we see actually that both types are usually coinciding within the same regions. We also wanted to look at some critical points of memory, and we asked people about, do they think whether famine is genocide, and what we see, we have that over 80% of population agreed with this. And these are maps. This is map of death rates in Ukraine during the famine, and this is map of the support of famine answering the question. And we see very interesting phenomenon. The strongest support is in the region where it never happened. This is West, and we can talk about national myths, and also we can talk about living post-memory if we are talking about central Ukraine. We asked about the recognition of UNUPA as fighters for independence, and here we have a striking difference. If in 2013 majority were against, in 2015 we have majority or close to majority pro, and these maps demonstrate shifts, and this shift is mainly happening in central part of Ukraine. We also asked whether in 2013 whether people would be liking or they support renaming streets, and we see that in all regions of Ukraine majority were against this. And in 2015 we asked about Leninopad, whether people are supporting this, and what we see, we have exactly equal parts pro and contra, but if we look at the map, this issue is actually dividing, And the third map demonstrates you where Leninopad is happening the most actively.
Just explain what it means. Leninopad.
Leninopad, when where statues of Lenin or whatever Soviet leaders are dismantled. So we see that actually those regions were mostly against are experiencing a quite heavy Leninopad issue. And we also asked our respondents about eight different types of monuments, if they would like to erect monuments to those personalities. In 2013 we see that non-united all regions of Ukraine. The highest number is 40% for Grushevsky, but we have a different situation in 2015, and what is happening, new cult of new heroes is appearing in Ukraine. These are Heavenly Hundred and ATO participants. And this is map where we have support for Maidan on the background and support for Heavenly Hundred and ATO monuments as blue and dark blue columns. And here we have support for Bandera monument and support for Lenin monument in dark and